Hi all. These are generally conversations between adults after the children have left the table. The language can be spicy and the subjects can get saucy. So if you're ready, this is the Southern Fork. Unscripted kitchen chats and also studio chats with some of the most interesting voices in the culinary South. I'm Stephanie Burt, a food and beverage writer who travels with her fork to write for a variety of publications, from magazines you might have on your coffee table to the website you love to visit for your favorite recipes. And I'm inviting you to come behind the scenes with me to get to know the people who make this Southern culinary landscape so special. I'm always hungry for the next bite, thirsty for that next sip, and ready for the next conversation. Let's dig in. The Southern Fork is presented by Townsend Automotive in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Well, it's beach season, shrimp season, farm stand season, and ice cream season, and so you know what that means. It's road trip season. I'm out on the road sharing good eats and drinks and introducing you to the people behind them. So if you're inspired to get out here too, but your vehicle is less than inspiring, please consider purchasing your next road trip ride from Townsend Automotive. Celebrating 49 years serving West Alabama, this company has been extending its reach so that you don't even have to be in the Tuscaloosa area to purchase a car from them. Nationwide vehicle delivery service is available for Southern Fork listeners, and it's something that makes buying just the right new or certified pre-owned vehicle even easier. Visit townsendhonda.com for current inventory, or, of course, if you're in West Alabama, stop in. Townsend Automotive always salutes local entrepreneurs, from restaurateurs to podcasters, and they welcome you to be part of a community that does the same. Dan Weidenbenner moved to Greenville, South Carolina in 2007 via Furman University. While there, he fell in love with the region and decided to stay, and then with the help of more than 50 volunteers, launched Mill Village Farms in 2012. The farm is located in the Greater Sullivan community of Greenville and includes 30 garden beds, a 60-foot greenhouse, a commercial kitchen, and a produce processing facility. And since 2018 has distributed close to 81,000 boxes of produce and provided 400 individual training opportunities for the neighborhood's youth. Dan serves as the executive director of Mill Village Farms and the parent organization, Village Ministries, and he is also a resident of the Greater Sullivan community. Welcome to the Southern Fork, Dan.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
So much fun.
It's only been, 3 years in the making, I think.
Well, here we are. We made it.
We made it. So right now, we're sitting in West Greenville, and this is my kind of part of town. I like these mill houses and stuff.
Familiar.
Yeah, it feels very familiar. A lot of places like West Asheville feels like this. Certain areas in North Charleston feel like this. If I'm just talking about the Carolinas. So Olympia and Columbia feels like this. I can go on and on. But anyway, will you tell us a little bit about the building that we're sitting in right now? Because this is Ground Zero, and it's not the only social enterprise, right?
Yeah. So part of Mill Village, we run 4 social enterprises out of Mill Village. Our largest is really Mill Village Farms. We're helping employ and develop youth as well as getting healthy food to our neighbors. But we also run a community bike shop, which is in the back here in our building called Village Wrench. We're employing youth, keeping bikes rolling, getting kids on bikes, helping community members that depend on a bike get to point A and point B on their bicycle safely every day. And we also run a business incubator called Village Launch that helps a lot of the minority and women-owned businesses that are based right here in this community get started, grow, expand, scale, pass down their business. If it's a family legacy business, as well as Village Engage, which is kind of our community organizing and advocacy arm that we do predominantly through the faith community here. But right here, we're sitting, in the middle of West Greenville, borders really a historic African-American community as well as a historic mill village. Pendleton Street, in many ways, is a busy commercial corridor, particularly back in the late 1800s, early 1900s. This building in particular was a former ice plant, actually. So folks got their ice from here.
I love an ice plant.
It's nice and cool in here. And then
high ceilings, big old square rooms,
concrete floors and thick walls, baby. And and then in the 50s, it was converted into an ice skating rink. It was called the West Greenville Ice Palace. So
how fun.
So fun. So we're sitting in the middle of an old ice rink here, if you can believe that. We just actually purchased and closed on this building, about a month and a half ago. And we're in the process of redeveloping and reconstructing this to a mixed-use campus to really serve all of the multifaceted programs and enterprises that we run at Mill Village. So construction just started this week.
And I'm right here in the middle of it going, where's Stan? Where's Stan? Well, I'm here really to talk about the farms today because that's what I talk about, but that's how we also intersected originally. Yeah. How many acres is the farm?
Yeah, right now we actually only run one urban farm right in the middle of downtown Greenville in the Sullivan community. That's, probably less than a few acres.
This has been happening for years, so we are deep into the project. So I'm excited to talk to you about this because I think that a lot of times we get people with big ideas, but implementation is a lot tougher. We're talking 80,000 food share boxes, right? Yeah. And they're not just given away. They're available for SNAP EBT. Then you have low to moderate income that can get a box for $20. And then anybody that wants a box can get a box for $25. So Absolutely. It's still really well-priced local produce. Yeah. Did you come at this from a farming perspective or from a Mill Village cultural community building perspective?
Yeah, really. I mean, we got started. I started, now a little over 10 years ago, moving into the Sullivan community where our urban farm is, immersing myself in this historic African-American community, joining a vibrant 100-plus-year-old African-American church and neighborhood association, and just getting to know parents and grandparents and youth and some of the small businesses and the schools and all the stakeholders, and really seeing how we have all these incredible assets. Land, people, culture, food, and what could we do to build up our community from within with the assets that we have? And so farming and growing food was one of the first kind of natural ways.
It leads to self-sufficiency.
Absolutely. And we have a real health crisis and a health disparity that happens in our community, in our neighborhood. And how do we change the health of our community? No better than the food that we're consuming every day and what's around us. And so the pastor of our local church, Pastor Sean Dogan, is passionate about health equity, creating equity and wealth in this community. And we were bringing farmers to actually come and sell produce at our church on Saturday mornings. And we had a community garden that was started by a group of seniors years ago. And, South Carolina heats and growing food is no task for the lighthearted.
No, it's no joke.
No joke.
No joke.
It's really exciting in the beginning, but that garden was waning really in interest for some of those seniors. And we had all these young teenagers that wanted to work, wanted to learn, wanted to earn some money. And we had this need for healthy food because we were bringing all these farmers selling food to neighbors. So we knew there was a need for that. And so we thought, well, what would it take for us to just hire 4 young men that lived in the community, took over this community garden, and really then sold that produce back into the community to the seniors themselves. And that's what we did in one summer in 2012. And we sold our produce out in about 5 to 10 minutes. People were fighting to get some of our first grown produce because they were so proud to see what our community did themselves. Our community often gets overlooked. It's often been disinvested in for decades for a variety of reasons.
Well, and I think that's the elephant in the room that we really have to talk about in Greenville right now is we're not that far down from a lot of redevelopment, a lot of new development all over the city. And disinvested is a different political term for gentrification.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Because it's a depressed area, and then it's easy when taxes go up to lose that,
and,
right?
And a large reason of why we have all this now investment is because investment wasn't here historically. Folks in our community could not take advantage of building their community up from within for both federal and local, really racist policies that kept these communities oppressed in a lot of different ways. And those that had resources rightfully left for greener pastures. And so, but that doesn't mean we have incredible stakeholders and residents that have been fighting for generations to build up their community kind of from within. And that's the approach really that Mill Village as a whole, as our entire Mill Village Ministries takes, is what assets do we have? We really believe that every community has strengths, has God-given gifts that can be leveraged to build up the community.
It's a diverse staff here, right? I mean, I'm talking to a white man founder director, right?
Yeah.
But we have a diverse staff, correct?
Absolutely. Our leadership team is predominantly actually made up of some incredible Black women that are leaders, some of which came through some of our programs that we've now hired and are helping lead the ship. But I can tell you, especially as a white man moving into this community, it took a lot of trust and still takes a lot of trust building and building that trust because it's been broken for a variety of reasons, both on the systemic level, but also on the interpersonal level.
Right.
And so, building relationships take time. And that's a large part of what we've had to do during this first decade is being present and knowing that we're not going to leave too.
And also, food is a great way to begin that.
That's such a great segue because I think food is it's something we all as humankind depend on. And we all have such a rich history and culture no matter where we're coming from. And it's something to share and give, and build trust, and walls come down because, we also are right at the barrier of a historic mill village, which was almost exclusively white and a historic African-American community that did not have access to many of those mill jobs that did create the first kind of economic boom in our community. So there's deep segregation. Even though we're in a diverse community, there are real walls and imaginary walls that separate us. And a lot of what we're trying to do as an entity is how to build bridges. And food is one of those amazing avenues to do that.
And food takes time. It's patient. You need some patience, right?
And it's not easy. It takes time. It takes some highs and lows. I remember when we first planted our first garden, we had some seniors coming and teaching us how to do it. And there was a lot of different ways. There were things I've never learned before. Everyone brought something kind of to the table.
Well, I was going to ask that, how did you train for this? It's been trial and error, right?
Absolutely.
So what are some of the things that grow really, really well in the urban farm that were like some of your early successes in this region?
Yeah, obviously.
Climate, I should say.
I mean, greens are a huge thing we love to grow. We love growing mustard greens, collard greens, lettuce mixes, all types of greens. We grow a variety of things, mainly because we want to bring variety to our lives from squash to eggplant, cucumbers, tomatoes, all the great summer veggies, of course, that are in the ground right now as we speak, as we're doing this podcast. And it's fun because people share their stories of how they prepare those and how they grew them too, in some ways, really difficult circumstances.
Right. So walk us through a summer cycle. Okay. So we have how many people on the farm right now working? Because you've got, we have to separate this. We have education and employment as part of it. it reminds me of Homeboy Bakery.
Yeah, I love Homeboy. They was one of my first inspiration. I love that you know Father G.
I've read all the books.
Oh, I
I'm a
love
big
it.
fan.
Oh my
Big fan.
gosh.
I've actually been to Homeboy in LA.
Amazing.
And met Father G.
He's amazing.
But I did not have my podcast mics, my little chopstick mics with me, but he's an amazing person. And so the point of that was that I was able to eat at Homeboy. This is an enterprise. It's you're producing things, you're creating products, you're selling things, and that there has to be a quality level. So will you walk us through kind of that cycle from the beginning of the week to the food share box?
Yeah, great question. So, as we started just growing produce here in our own community, we started selling that just in church parking lots when we first began. And we thought, wow, we had other churches that were actually asking us to come and sell produce in their communities. And so we worked out a food truck model, and we had a mobile market that then started selling produce in dozens of different neighborhoods across our town. And it had a lot of early success, but it was really hard to financially sustain as a business in itself, and hard to scale in a lot of ways. And so we iterated that and has evolved to now being a food share program, which is a bulk produce box that really creates an economy of scale for consumers that are really on a fixed income, because value and convenience is what's driving a lot of the consumer behaviors in our community. Healthy food is some of the most expensive and generally some of the most challenging produce to secure. Right. And so unhealthy options, which are usually the most convenient and the most inexpensive, become the default.
Because it's a lot of calories. You're buying dollar per calorie. So it's about that. Like if you buy 4 cucumbers for $3, it's great, but it's not going to get
not the calories. You might need to fill bellies.
Right. So I thought about this. I've talked about this over the years. I've worked, my listeners know that I helped Community Supported Grocery in Charleston develop a pilot program recently in Columbia, South Carolina. And one of the things I loved about their program was that as a single person on a non-fixed budget, because freelance is a lot. Let me just leave it there. But still, my food budget is a real budget, and it should be. Everybody's thinking about that. We're not the only ones. I was really, really interested in buying local and seasonal because of that connection to the seasons. It's just it's a natural way to live. Plus, it helps cooking and everything. But when I would get my CSA box, I would get enough asparagus for the week, but not much else, like if I worked with variety. That. So will you talk a little bit about the variety and really thinking about the residents of this area and how the box is composed?
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's a long lead in.
I know, but it's a great question because we've had to learn that a lot over the years and how this model has evolved. And it's at its basis, a year-round program that's really trying to meet the basic needs of how to get healthy food into our neighbors' hands at a price that they can afford. That's also sustainable. That can be week after week after week. And it's not just the local and seasonal stuff. It's the apples, bananas, and oranges that aren't growing necessarily in the upstate of South Carolina that we're sourcing from distributors and other farmers around the country to ensure that it's really just meeting those basic needs of produce. So there's roughly 12 to 15 varieties of items in each of those boxes, ranging from greens to summer vegetables to fruits to potatoes and onions, practical, basic things that families we know are going to source. And then we add in those local seasonal items as we're able to every other week. So those things change out. So it becomes very practical is what I'd say. I love CSAs, but, often if you were to talk to some of our neighbors who have to be very choosy on what they spend their hard-earned money on, they need something that really meets their lifestyle needs.
Right. Going a little personal, you're a decade in. What is something that, for those that are listening, social enterprise, we get really excited. Obviously, I love Father Greg, so I've read all of his books and think about this kind of idea a lot. What is something you wish you knew that was a lot more of a challenge than you realized?
Yeah, one of the things we're really focused in on is creating kind of upward economic mobility. Greenville, South Carolina actually ranks as one of the toughest places to get out of poverty, top 20 counties in the country. And so,
wow, I did not know that.
So yeah, even though you see us on all top 10 lists for just about every good thing you might imagine, from retiring to restaurants to walkability to trails, to weather. But when you think of a kid that's born into poverty, this is one of the worst places that they can be born. I think less than a 6% chance of getting out of the bottom fifth tile of our community. And so breaking that cycle of poverty is a very multifaceted thing. I think anyone that goes into this work that thinks there's a silver bullet to breaking the cycle of poverty, I can promise you they're wrong. And so I think thinking that through, that every stage of life, there needs to be opportunity and there needs to be challenges, and there's systematic things that also need to be challenged that are out of the control of our neighbors as well to break the cycle of poverty. And those things need to be addressed too. And so I think one of the biggest things that I've learned is this is much more complex work, and it is work that takes decades. In some ways, I would say we're in the chapter 1 of the work that we're doing. I hope of many more chapters, because to see this change and to see the needle move, it's going to take generations of flourishing, because we've had in many ways generations of oppression in communities like this that haven't been given the opportunity to succeed like others have in this country.
Right. If we were looking at the Mill Village, there is also that class, and there is this idea, like for Southern Fork listeners that aren't familiar with the mill system, historically, you would not make money that you could use outside of the Mill Village, because you were making money that was like monopoly money, basically, that you paid back to the company for the rent, and you paid to the company store and all that. So it was a very inclusive thing, but it was hard to break out of that too. And then when the mills shut down, you don't have that generational wealth, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I would say the mills,
I know, I just
hit
the high points.
Just the high points, but I think anyone that's thinking that these mill communities were, the rosy days of yesterday, it was by no means a place for communities to flourish, even in the white communities that were very Appalachian communities that were coming for what they thought were better futures, but very hard to build wealth because you couldn't own your own house. I mean, they didn't even own their own churches. The mills own their churches, own the community centers, they own the stores that they shopped at. We're sucking resources out of the people and the place here. And so by no means were these workers in a lot of ways better off, maybe a little better off from working the land in some sense and some stability. But it was, in the late 1800s, early 1900s, not an easy time for mill workers either. No, and child labor too. Absolutely. Was very, very big in that moment. But, I have to ask, do you see the needle? Do you feel reward in this work? Yeah, I mean, I think I feel like it depends what day you catch me. I think, yes, absolutely. We're moving the needle in the ways that we're working and getting families healthy food on a regular basis and seeing health change and lifestyles change. We see youth that are finding their purpose and their identity and the skills and the pathways to move out of poverty. Again, though, for every success, there's always failures. I can tell you some incredible stories of students that have come through our program and graduated college and are now successfully employed and are giving back and volunteering and even supporting this work. It's amazing. Those are the things that give me goosebumps when you see, when we started working with a 14-year-old that's now 24 and is a teacher at our local school and is, giving back to others what she's been given. But we have stories of struggle and pain because the lifestyle of living paycheck to paycheck sucks people in. When you're in poverty, it becomes a mindset and it becomes really hard to break free from that. And so we have a lot of work to do. We have a lot more, I feel like, strategies we got to have in place. There's systematic things that still need to be changed in communities like this to see real flourishing happening.
what's making you hungry? Are you looking for more land, for more farming?
Yeah, great question. Yeah. I mean, hungry in a lot of ways. I mean, I think right now we have grown so much during COVID in many ways, and the folks that we're serving and the quality of the work that we're doing. But as I mentioned earlier, there's still things that are being unaddressed. And so one of the things that really makes me hungry right now is how do we support young adults that are graduating high school, going off to technical school or to university, keeping them on the path of success as they go out of high school? Because there's a lot of support for a lot of our high schoolers just within the schools themselves. But when you're 18, 19, 20-year-old, maybe you're working at a restaurant, maybe taking a class on the side, but your car breaks down or your parents are maybe getting evicted and you need to help pay for rent or a deposit on a new apartment. It sucks you dry and you get caught up in this crisis to crisis.
Yeah, that crisis.
And even though our students have such incredible strengths and resiliency and the tools in their toolbox, they need the space, is what I would say. And that's something that's making me hungry right now, is how can we create space for the next generation as they graduate high school so that they can focus on themselves. They can put the air mask on themselves, so that they can help others. Mm-hmm. And we can keep them on this journey to upward economic mobility.
Yeah. And as a social enterprise, before we pop on to the next question, I know listeners are wondering if there is a profit made, does it go back into the business? Can you tell us a little bit about that economic structure?
Yeah. So particularly with our food share program, so we sell bulk produce boxes. All of the revenue generated really helps support that enterprise 100%. In fact, it doesn't necessarily generate enough profit. We still have to raise a little bit of money to help kind of support it. But the business model helps it grow exponentially faster than if we were depending on, say, donor dollars or philanthropy to kind of grow and sustain this. And so,
because that's not what this is about. This philanthropy is a different model.
Exactly. And philanthropy has its place. We certainly need philanthropy to help support it, but that's not what's driving it. What's driving it is this model, this business model that helps grow. And that's what our community needs. It needs systemic solutions that aren't going anywhere when the tides change. Mm-hmm. And that's unfortunately what happens in communities like this when it's so philanthropy dependent.
This is a really interesting job you made up for yourself, Dan.
Oh, well, I wouldn't have it any other way.
So what's one aspect of your personality that really meshes well, like a puzzle piece matches with an aspect of the job?
Well, I've still had to learn that. I've had, already 10 years to learn that. In some ways, I'm still learning what my strengths are and what my weaknesses are. But one of the things that I absolutely love, that I feel like I'm uniquely positioned to do, is to really help tell the story. I love going and sharing what we're doing with partner agencies, businesses that want to work alongside us, funders, government officials. I love getting the word out and making these kind of strategic connections. Mm-hmm. Because like I said, there's a lot of walls, some of which are imaginary, that just need to be crossed and need a hand that just stretches across and says, we need you. You have a gift here and we need you to help us in this way. And that's all it is. Mm-hmm. That might be, a senior that's a shut-in, but we have, has incredible gifts to cook and are now running makeshift cooking classes in their homes to other seniors to teach them how to use some of the new produce that's happening. And so those are the opportunities that I think we all have. We all have been given gifts to give. And I feel like one of the ones that I love doing is really helping make those strategic connections.
Cool. One thing keeping you up at night, quick fire?
Gosh, yeah. Well, obviously we're in the middle of a pretty big redevelopment project. So in a real estate project, it is by no means easy. There are a lot of moving parts. And so, probably juggling the complexities of doing a big deal like this have probably kept me up at night the most, aside from, what we can do better and how we can support our team, because our staff are really the magic behind the curtain. Right now we're sitting in our food share office, We have, 4+ team members right now working with volunteers, dozens of volunteers, helping pack hundreds of boxes from a variety of farms, planning strategically on how we get those to our community first thing tomorrow morning. So there's a lot of magic that goes on, and our staff are really that magic, ensuring that they have the tools and the resources that they need to succeed.
Logistics.
Logistics.
Well, I know you went to Furman, but where did you grow up?
I grew up actually in South Florida, so a suburb of kind of Fort Lauderdale, Miami.
No one ever says that. I've never had that answer.
Well, there's lots of Floridians now up here. And went to Furman and just stayed. I fell in love really in a lot of ways with South Carolina and the South. I got the good fortune to work actually down in the Low Country in a small rural town community called Allendale before I started this work. And that was so illuminating to see, again, how a community works together to support itself. And that was one of the amazing things I got to see down there.
Yeah, Allendale's doing some cool things over there. For the last question, I reserved just for Southern Fork guests, and that's why I wanted to know where you were from, because I'm interested in what foods you're going to put in this magic picnic basket. So I would love to bring some foods to you in this virtual question that bring you life. I can time travel. I can go back and ask anybody to make one more bite of something you just would love to have one more bite of. I can cook a little bit, and I can also source for you. So I'd love to bring you some of your favorite things in this basket, and they don't have to go together. And this is not Mill Village Farms. This is Dan's meal. Dan's dream meal. So tell me some things I can put in that basket, if you will.
Gosh, that's a fun question. Well, I'll tell you, I have 2 small children right now, so we do a lot of cooking. And my wife gets a lot of the credit. I'm just the sous chef at home. But this past, 2 years, she's been on this journey of cooking all things Ottolenghi, which has been a blast for all of us. And so cooking all this amazing Israeli Middle Eastern food has been so life-giving to our house, and especially me. So if I could put a picnic together, I think it would be some of my favorite recipes in that cookbook. I think some of the fun things we've made recently is a fun, easy-to-cook baba ganoush, which I love. Any kind of dip. If you have a dip for me, I'm there for it. So a picnic filled with
Give me a
dozen dips with some chips, and I will, get myself sick on all the dips.
Well, I have to ask, do you include pimento cheese in that world?
I love pimento cheese, and that's certainly something we would have never had growing up in South Florida. Would have never known what pimento cheese is. So absolutely.
Well, great. Well, if people want to learn more about Dan and his work at Mill Village Enterprises, and that include Mill Village Farms, you can go to thesouthernfork.com. I'm going to have links there as well as images so you can see the face behind the voice. If you like what you hear, I love an urban farm. So there's more in the archives you can check out. Just go to thesouthernfork.com, or you can search on your favorite podcast app. If you're listening, you've already found me. But please, the best way to make sure that you keep up with these stories is to subscribe, because all communities are diverse and they have lots of untold stories, quiet stories, loud stories, and delicious stories. Thank you for sharing Mill Villages today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
Hello and welcome to Talking with My Mouth Full. Let's talk a little bit more today about mill villages, and specifically mill villages in the Carolinas. At one time, Greenville touted itself as the textile capital of the world, and Greenville is in the upstate of South Carolina, close to the Appalachian Mountains, still considered the foothills. It was home to 19 textile mills at its height, and those were in an area known as the Textile Crescent. So Greenville historically had at one time thousands of people living in mill villages, and I think that's just important to note. This is even in a larger context of really central and western parts of the Carolinas, or close to the foothills and into central the central Piedmont areas or the Midlands areas of the Carolinas all had a lot of mills, textile mills at the time. There were even mills dedicated to just dyeing the cotton fabric that was being produced at other mills. You had everywhere from Burlington, North Carolina to Charlotte, North Carolina, where I grew up. My dad actually grew up in a historic mill community. His parents did not work for the mill. It wasn't a closed area, but it was right at the North Davidson mill. And so even my grandmother briefly worked at a mill during World War II when the men were away for, fighting the war in Europe. Mill villages and mill culture still lingers in this part of the Carolinas very, very much. And something that's important to Greenville and a lot of these communities that I just mentioned is redeveloping the mill village properties and the mills themselves, the properties. So you'll see food halls, you'll see apartments. A lot of people will pay a lot of money for a loft apartment in a former mill. You'll see creative redevelopment use of these beautiful, massive old warehouse buildings and factory buildings. So Dan's work at Village Ministries is really just a small little peek into what's happening now in these communities in a post-textile mill world in the Carolinas. So thank you so much for listening. And if you want to learn more about this too, and you are headed to Greenville, the Greenville Historical Society has a ton of information as well. And it seems like a lot of you are headed to Greenville this summer. It was pretty packed with tourists. So enjoy your time out on the road or in your backyard picking that fresh summer okra. I'll be right here next week. Actually, right here next week is somewhere else on the road, but I'll be on the mic chatting with you. Until then.
You've been listening to The Southern Fork. I can't wait to bring you more culinary conversations, but in the meantime, I have one question. Are you going to eat all that?